Welcome to Module 4 of the Rapid Takeoff and Estimate Software Skills course. Once you've created your estimate, there are many tools available in Estimator Express to help you make use of the data. In this module, you'll learn how to use the bar chart, reports, and customer quote features. To do this, you need to open up our training estimate, which is called 6 Pennine Lane. From the Estimator Express main menu, click on My Estimates. Look down the list to find 6 Pennine Lane, then click on it and click the Open Estimate button. After a moment, you'll find yourself on the summary screen of the estimate. We're going to start by looking at the fourth tab along, the Chart tab. If you can click on the Chart tab, once the bar chart opens up, you'll see we've got quite a substantial chart. Let's take a look at what's on screen at the moment. So on the left-hand side of the chart here, we've got all of the build phases within the chart. Across the bottom, you'll see dates in 4-week increments. And at the top, you'll see your company name and a statement saying what type of job the bar chart is for, so in this case, an extension. You may have noticed that the chart contains many different build phases that haven't actually had any estimating done for them. So to clean this up so that the chart only shows the estimated build phases, click on the Remove Unused Build Phases button. You'll find that on the top menu. When you click the Remove Unused Build Phases button, a dialog box will pop up telling you about all of the different build phases which are going to be removed from the chart. So all you need to do is click Yes to confirm that you want to remove those build phases. And after a moment, you'll see a much smaller chart now, and we can start working on it to make it fit our particular job. So to alter the chart, what we need to do is open up the Edit Bar Chart tool. So you need to click the Edit Bar Chart button on the top menu. When you do that, this Edit Bar Chart dialog box will pop up. So at the top of the Edit Bar Chart box, there is a Calendar button. It has the number 31 on it. Clicking on this will allow you to change the start date of the job. So for practice, let's just click on that calendar icon, change the month to the next month down. So let's say I'm going to change it to October. And then once you've selected a month, you can then click on the proposed start date on the calendar. If you click on a Monday, then you'll get a full week in the bar chart. So click OK once you've selected the date, and then you'll see the job start date has updated in the Edit Bar Chart dialog box here and also on the bar chart behind. So let's just have a look at the different tools we've got on the Edit Bar Chart dialog box. So in the main section of the Edit Bar Chart box, we can control the start date using the tools on the left-hand side, and the duration using the tools on the right-hand side of each of the build phases. So using the up and down arrows, you can control the length and the start date of the different build phases. In between those two sets of tools, we've got the build phase drop-down box. This is where you select which build phase you want to alter the start date or duration of. On the right-hand side here, you can see we've got an Add Bars button. If you want to add in a build phase that you've just removed from the chart that has no estimated data, you can click the Add Bars button to do that. If you click the Zoom button, that allows you to select a particular time frame within the job to zoom in on. If you click the Filter Bars button, that will allow you to show a selected number of build phases on screen. You select the build phases that you want to show. So if I click Filter Bars and just show you a selection of build phases that I want to show on screen. If you want to get rid of that filter, all you need to do is click the Refresh button below. The Refresh button actually does several things. It zooms the chart to show all of its contents, so it makes the most of the space available. If your build phases are out of date, clicking the Refresh button will move them up and down the chart so that they're positioned correctly. And as you've seen there, it removes the filter when you've filtered some bars. Just to the left here, we've got the Cascade button. That moves subsequent build phases left or right after you've moved a build phase. This will make more sense in a moment when we practice it. So assuming you've been following the training course closely, you'll have the design phase and planning application build phases at the top of your chart. If you don't, or if you're using a different job for training purposes, that's not a problem. All you need to do is make use of whatever build phases you want as we go through the exercises before. It's all just for practice, so it doesn't matter exactly which build phase you select. Okay, to start with then, we're going to reorder some build phases and make use of the refresh button. So first of all, we're going to select the design phase build phase from the build phase drop down box in the middle of the dialog box here. So click on design phase to make sure it's selected. And then we are going to change the start date of this build phase. So you'll recall that we can change the start date of a build phase using the week and day boxes on the left hand side of the edit bar chart box. So if you click the up arrow next to where it says week, you'll see that changes the start date of the design build phase to week 1. Click it a few more times and you'll see on the chart above that the build phase is shifting along to the right as we change the start date there. Click those up and down arrows a few times to get a feel for what's going on. And once you're happy with how those arrows work, set the start of the design build phase to week 1, which is actually after 1 week has elapsed. We're now going to hide a few build phases. In fact, we're going to hide the design phase, the planning application phase, and the building regs build phase. They're in the chart because we've used them in some of the preliminary workbooks that we've done some estimating in, such as the design and planning costs workbook, which assigns costs to these build phases. Typically, you will not want to keep them in your build phase chart, so we can hide them. If, however, you do want to keep them in the chart, of course, that's fine, you can leave them. So to remove any build phases you don't want, you need to set the duration of the build phase to 0. So again, ensuring that the design phase build phase is selected in the build phase drop down box, or whichever bar you've got at the top of your bar chart, it doesn't matter which one it is. We're going to click the down arrow to change the duration of this build phase to 0. So press the down arrow until the duration says 0 and you'll see the design phase bar has disappeared from the chart. So now we're going to do the same thing for the planning application build phase. So on the build phase drop down box, select planning application and then reduce the duration to 0 weeks. And again, the planning application bar will disappear from the chart. Now let's select the building regulations build phase. Again, reduce the duration to 0 weeks so that it disappears from the chart. Okay, so now we've hidden those build phases, we need to correct the chart as we don't want those 3 rows of empty space at the top of the chart. So to do this, we just need to click the refresh button. And you'll see that the unused rows are removed and the chart is expanded to fill the space. So now you can see I've got commencement as the top build phase at the top of the chart. You might have pre-contract or another build phase. It doesn't matter exactly which build phase it is. However, you can see the start date for this build phase is several weeks into the job, which obviously isn't correct. So we need to move this first build phase to the start of the job. You can move the start date of any phase. So to do that, once again, you need to select the build phase from the build phase drop down box. So I'm going to select commencement, select whichever build phase is at the top of your chart. Now we need to set the start week to 0 because it comes right at the beginning of the job. So click the down arrow until the start week of the commencement build phase, or whichever build phase you're working on, is 0 and the bar is right at the start of the chart. Now we want to pull all the other build phases across the chart so that we don't have that big gap in there. So all we need to do is click the Cascade button. You'll recall that when we click the Cascade button, all of the subsequent build phases will be moved along so that they follow on nicely from the first build phase. If you move a build phase to the right and then click the cascade button, it will move all the subsequent build phases to the right. So if we move site setup to start in week 2 and then click the cascade button, you'll see that all of those bars have moved to the right hand side. So they've been put back a week. So as well as moving the start dates of build phases, you can also enter the duration of any build phase to make it longer or shorter. So for practice, let's alter the length of the brickwork shell build phase. So in the build phase drop-down box, select the brickwork shell build phase. Now go to the week option under the duration and set that to 3 weeks. And then let's use the day options as well and increase the duration of our brickwork shell phase to 3 weeks and 3 days. And as we did that, you'll have seen that the bar has extended on the chart. Of course, the subsequent build phases now need shunting along to take into account the fact that the brickwork shell is going to take longer. So we need to click the cascade button and then click the refresh button to finish. Okay, so that's a quick introduction to the bar chart and how to change the duration and the start of each of the build phases. So once you've finished editing your bar chart, click Close. If you're happy with your bar chart now, you can print it using the Print button on the top menu. You can use this as part of your presentation to your clients or to help you manage your project. Before we leave this section, there's just a few things I want to make you aware of. The bar chart controls all of the reports that make use of dates. So reports like cash flow, profit forecast, order schedules, all of the reports which use dates will use the start and end dates of each build phase in this chart here to construct their data. The charts themselves don't read the estimate data, so they always start out the same and they require you to edit them, so you need to set them up. There's several different reasons for this. The chart can't be aware of any holidays, planned breaks, changes in available workforce and so on, so it requires you to do a bit of fine-tuning. To help you with that, there is a report with construction times for build phases that you can make use of. So you could combine the data from this report with your knowledge of the job and any complexities of your particular job to come up with a realistic build schedule. So for now, click on the Summary tab to return to the main estimate screen. We're now going to click on the Reports tab in your estimate. A box will pop up telling you that the build phases which were zeroed out in the chart, building regs, design phase and planning application, will be placed back into the chart. So for that reason, you would want to print the bar chart before navigating away from it. Click OK to confirm that. And let's take a look at the reports. The reports section is where you can get data reports, and it's also the section where you can create your customer quotes. Firstly, we're going to look at some of the data reports in the list. The first 25 reports here with a pie chart icon, they are presentation style reports. So we've got bar charts, graphs and pie charts. You might find them useful if you need to make a presentation of data to your boss or to shareholders or the bank manager. But for the average small builder, you might not find them so useful. Have a look at them in your own time, see what they're about, and you might find that some of them display information in a way that you find helpful. The reports that we're going to focus on today are the bottom 2/3 of the list here, those with a, looks like a Word document icon next to them. These contain huge amounts of really useful data about your estimate, and if you use these reports well, it will help you manage your business more efficiently. Just a quick tip, before we look at any of the reports, you can clean up the data by removing resources that have 0 quantities from the reports. So to do that, you would click the Delete Zeros drop-down menu and click Remove Resources with a quantity of 0. Similarly, you can click Remove Resources with a cost of 0. That will tidy up any 0 lines from your reports. Okay, so we're going to look at several different reports and I'm going to highlight how you might use them. We strongly recommend that you spend time going through all of the reports to get a good grasp of the data that's available and to see which data you can make use of. The first report we're going to have a look at is the sales price including profit. So it's the third report down of the spreadsheet style reports. So click on that report and then you can click the Open Report button. Of course, you can also right click and click the Open Report option on that menu there. Now this report gives you a simple breakdown of costs, wastage, profit and total sales price, all by build phase. So you can see on the left hand side the data is broken down into build phase. Have a quick look at the report, and once you understand it, click on the Close Report button on the top menu to return to the report screen. The next report we're going to look at is the Plastering Costs report. You'll see there are several different trade-specific reports available. So there's a painting costs one, plumber's costs, roof tiler, ground workers costs, and so on. Use whichever ones are relevant to you. They're all set up, they're all structured in the same way, they just look at different trades. So if you click on the Plastering Costs report and open it up, either using the button on the top menu or the right click option, and you can see that the Plastering Costs report shows the plastering build phase, the labour is being used, the tasks they're carrying out, and the cost for each task. Again, there are similar reports for plumbing, roof tilers, ground workers, and so on. Once you've had a quick look at that report, close the report and return to the list of reports once again. The next report we're going to have a look at is another really simple one. It's the costs by resource chart. You'll see it's just under halfway down the list. This will show you your costs by the different resource types. So if we click Open Report, so we can see it's split into the 5 different resource types and shows you the cost for each aspect of the job. Once you're happy with that, click Close Report. So we've looked at some of the simpler reports, and we're now going to look at some slightly more complex and possibly more important reports. We're going to look at the cash flow report next. That's the next one down in the list. Open up the cash flow report. The cash flow report shows your outgoings for the job. So it's chart based. It makes use of the dates in your bar chart, so it requires you to have a reasonably accurate chart prior to looking at this report, or the information will be a bit meaningless. So the due date column on the left hand side here, this is an approximate date for having to pay for your materials and your labour. It gives you a good idea of when you need cash in from your client to cover your outgoings. So you can see outgoings by date and then the cumulative costs on the right hand side. Let's close that report. And next we're going to have a look at another really important one, the profit forecast report. Click on the profit forecast report and open it. The profit forecast report shows you the profit that you will be earning during the job. So you can see the profit by date and also the total profit from the job. This is a gross profit figure here. If you have set the job up with all the profit markups set at 30%, then our general assumption is that half of that, the first 15%, will disappear in company overheads, thus leaving the remaining 15% as your actual net profit. So looking at the figure on screen, you'd want to halve it to get your actual projected net profit. So here's a quick example regarding profit. Imagine the total profit figure for a particular job is £10,000. Then your net profit would be approximately £5,000. So let's assume the price of your job to your customer is £42,000 plus VAT, which comes to just over £50,000. If your customer asks you to knock off 10% of the price, that would be £5,000. In other words, all of your net profit would be gone. However, if the customer asks for a 5% discount, then that would be just over £2,500, leaving you with around £2,500 of net profit. So by going into that negotiating situation, knowing what your net profit would be for the job, you'll be much better informed about your break-even figure, and you'll be far less likely to agree a price that could lead to a loss. Of course, there are situations for businesses sometimes where you decide to discount a job to zero net profit because at least you know that everyone will be getting paid. And if you know the profit figures to start with, at least you're in control. If you know the job is not going to deliver profit to the business, that means that you're in a position where you can better control company spending on equipment and so on. So you'll still be managing your business better. So we always say, if you try to think of yourself not as a builder, but as a businessman or businesswoman who happens to build stuff to make money, then this stuff is really important. Having a snapshot of your future profits or the lack of them will obviously help you manage your company spending to help you fall in line with projections. Okay, so that's the profit forecast report. Let's click close report. Just a quick tip while we're talking about profit. On the Estimator Express main menu, there's an option called My Projects. Now, My Projects allows you to link estimates together and create data from multiple jobs. So you might want to use My Projects if you were working on a development with a few houses on. But another example of where you would use My Projects would be to link all of the estimates from jobs over the next 12 months. You could then create a combined profit forecast from all of these jobs, and from that create an annual profit forecast for the business. So My Projects on the main menu might be something that you want to have a look at. Okay, the next report we're going to open is the labour time schedule report, which is 3 rows down. So open the labour time schedule report. Now, when we were looking at the bar chart, this was the report I referred to, which shows you the labour times that Estimator Express has calculated for the different build phases. So use this information here to help you set up your bar chart correctly. If you have any lines that appear here saying not required, you can hide them using this hide not required option. I don't seem to have any in this report, but you can always hide them if you do. So that's the labour time schedule report, which you can use to help you set up your bar chart. So let's close that report. Just a few more reports we're going to look at before we move on. Let's have a quick look at the plant used report. This lists all of the plant and equipment requirements you have, broken down by build phase. Let's close that report. Next, we're going to have a look at the materials used chart, which is the third from the bottom. So click on the materials used report and click open report. Now this report lists all the materials required by build phase. We're going to use this report to look at how you can edit and alter your reports to suit your needs, and a couple of other options that are available in reports. Before we do that, just a couple of words about how you can use this report. We find that the typical builder goes to see his or her merchant 3 or 4 times a week, and each time you do that, you're spending maybe 2 hours travelling there in the merchant and coming back. So each week you probably spend the equivalent of a full day dealing with your merchant. Of course, there's circumstances that force you to go to the merchant. There's always going to be the odd ad hoc purchase that you need to make. But if you plan your material orders really effectively, you can reduce the amount of time you spend at the merchant and increase your efficiency. You can use the time that you save for tasks that will make your business more money. So finding new clients, estimating, selling, project management, or even actually just spending a bit more time with your family. So I'm going to talk about how we can edit this report and use it to help you plan your material orders better. There is another report in Estimator Express called Material Order Schedule. The one drawback of that report is that each item has a set delivery lead time, and it may or may not match your merchant's lead times for some of the materials. So you can use this report, the materials used report, to create a delivery schedule for your merchant. So space on site allowing, that means you can have all your materials delivered to your site, to your schedule, so that they're available when you need them. And that way you don't have to chase your merchant, you don't have to drive to the merchant and make those ad hoc collections of materials. So to create your own delivery schedule, what you'd want to do is start by exporting this report. So you'll see on the top menu there's a button called Export Report. If you click that button, you can save the materials used report as an Excel spreadsheet. You can then edit this spreadsheet using Excel. You can round up or down the materials as required. So you'll see there's an order quantity column here. That's the one you want to use. You can round up those figures or round them down as you need to. And then you can add delivery dates for materials on the right hand side of the spreadsheet, so you can just add your own column in there. Then you can give this document to your merchant and they can deliver them as per your schedule. Of course, you're still going to make the occasional visit to the merchant, but by doing this, you'll reduce how many times you have to, and you're going to be making better use of your time. So now you see what we can use the materials used report for. We're going to look at how we can change the content of it. What we're about to do can be applied to any report, and you can ultimately even make your own reports by altering our default ones. So you'll see that every report has headings at the top of the columns: build phase, description, purchase cost, and so on. These can be dragged in or out of any report. Above the report, you'll see a list of different column headers. These can be dragged onto the report to give additional data. So to start off with then, we can remove the build phase column that we've got here. This way you'll have one big list of materials that's not split up by build phase. So first, click anywhere on the report to ensure that the report is selected. Now hover your mouse over the column heading build phase. So if you hover your cursor over the build phase column header there, you'll see you get a cursor with a four-way cross. This means that you can now drag the column heading out of the report. So if you click down your left mouse button on the heading and holding it down, move your mouse upwards, and you'll see a green line appears showing you exactly where the column will be dropped. So if you release the left mouse button, then that column will be dropped in the position you've selected. So you'll now see build phase in the build phase column header in the list at the top, and now all the materials have been grouped together in the chart. We can also drag headings down from the list above and place them in the report. So if you locate the column heading called type, again, when that four-way cross arrow appears, click and hold down your left mouse button and you can drag it onto the report. And if you move it around, you'll see the green line indicates where the column heading will be placed. So for practice purposes, if you move your cursor over the description column, you'll see the line appears to the left-hand side here, indicating that the column is going to be indicated to the left. So once you've seen that, release the left mouse button and you'll see that that type column appears to the left-hand side of the chart. So that's how you can remove and add columns of data to your report. You'll see here under the resource column header that the information is actually filtered. So at the moment it's filtered to show only material resources. There are other items with filters on, and you can use the filters to further control the sort of data you've got in the report. So if we scroll up a little bit, you'll see, for example, there's a column heading called location. If we click the drop down arrow there, you can see there's a list of various locations. So you could use this option to show materials being used for a particular location. So if I select the ground slab and click OK, you'll see the resources for the ground slab. Or if I click on the filter again, we can see all of the resources for the rear of the extension. Okay, now let's close the report. When you've changed a report, you might decide that you want to reset it back to its default layout, and you can always do that using the Delete Reset button here. So if you click Delete Reset Report button on the top menu, it will reset the report just within this estimate. Click Yes to the dialog box asking if you want to return the report to its original state. As I mentioned at the start of this section, please do take some time later on to have a browse through all of the different reports so that you can see the sort of data that's available. Okay, so now we're on to the final section of the training course, the section on the customer quotation. You need to be in the report screen to create a quote, so you'll always need to click onto the Reports tab before you can create your customer quote. And then you need to click the Customer Quotes drop-down menu on the top menu there. There are 4 different options within customer quotes. So you can create a quote by build phase. This will create a traditional customer quote, breaking down the information into build phases. And this is the quote that you'd use for the vast majority of work. There's another option under here for creating your quote by workbook. So this breaks down the quote into workbooks. For most customers, it's not so informative, but where it is useful is if you're creating a trade-specific quote. For example, if you were plastering 4 rooms, you can create a plastering workbook for each room by renaming the workbooks, and then you can show a plastering cost by room. So there are scenarios in which that quote option is preferable. Next, we've got the picture wizard. When you look at any dimension wizard, when you're inside a workbook, you'll see there's a camera icon. Clicking on this icon takes a snapshot of the dimension screen with the dimensions that you have entered. So you can then use the picture wizard to paste these shots into an email or document so that you have a visual of the dimensions you've entered. It may be useful on site or for showing to an architect, for example. And then last of all, we've got the previous quotes option. Every time you create a quote, it's automatically saved in its unedited format by Estimator Express. So this button allows you to recall any previous quotes, which is handy if you want to compare changes. So for today, we're going to select that most commonly used option, which is the Quote Wizard by Build Phase option. And when the Quote Wizard opens up, you'll be presented with a picture of some footings. Now that doesn't mean that you have estimated a footing, it's just an example to show what happens when you select the various options below. So on the left hand side you can see that you can select whether you want to specify or to show no resources, key resources or all resources. So if I click the different options, you'll see the effect it has on the footing build phase above. So you can show only the key resources or you can show all of the resources. We would normally recommend using the second or third option, but of course ultimately the choice is yours. On the right hand side we've got 5 tick boxes. Tick each one on and off to see the effect on the footings example again. So you can choose to have the phase totals in there or you can switch those off. You can decide whether to show build phase pictures or not. Now, we would usually recommend that you leave these on if your customer is a domestic client. The image that you've got there creates a link in the customer's mind and it helps them visualize the components of the build. So for a domestic client, this helps them create that emotional bond with the work that's about to happen. It might sound a bit highbrow, but it is actually based on psychology. It's the same reason that if you walk into a car showroom, the salesman will get you sitting inside the car as soon as possible to help you form that attachment, that connection to the vehicle. So it's subtle, but it's actually quite a valuable part of the sales process. So leave the pictures in if it's for a domestic client. Of course, if your quote is for a business client, there's far less emotion involved. They tend to be looking more intently at the data, so you might switch the pictures off for this type of client. So next we've got the sales price including inflation option. So you'll see the effect that has on the cost, whether you include the inflation or not. So obviously adding inflation to your quote will increase your price to the customer. Of course, when you give them the quotes, you can then explain to your customer that inflation has been taken into account, and that demonstrates exactly how accurate your quote is. You can mention that any competing quotes probably won't have taken inflation into account, so are likely to be less accurate. Use it if you wish, or if you don't, then of course you can untick it so your customer quote doesn't include inflation. I'm going to switch that on for now. Next, we've got the customer-friendly descriptions. If we switch on the customer-friendly descriptions, you'll see it simply gives shorter, simpler descriptions for selected products. So you can use customer-friendly descriptions if you want. Again, probably more likely if you're quoting for a domestic client. Finally, then we've got the order quantities option, so you can show the order quantities for your materials. We know a lot of builders are fearful about putting order quantities on their quotes, but it will actually strengthen the quality of your quote as it allows you to explain your costs to the client. If you're worried about your client showing the quote to another builder, don't be. There's a way you can work around it. You can produce the same quote twice, one copy with quantities and a second without. Use the first one with the order quantities on there to show your client, and then make sure you leave the second copy with your client, which doesn't have the order quantities, for your client to keep. And that way, there's no way your client can show the quote to another builder with the order quantities in there. So those are the main options that you have within the quote. But before we click the print button to create the quotation, we're just going to have a look at a few of the other background customization options that are available in the quote wizard. So click the More button on the bottom left hand side, and then click on Preferences. On the Preferences screen, we're going to click on the Page Setup button here to start with. Here there's a number of different page settings that you can check and change. So first of all, you can import your company logo. If you've got a company logo and you want it to appear on the customer quote, then you would click the Browse button here, find your logo image on your computer, and you can import it into your quote. It does need to be a graphics file such as a JPEG, a bitmap, or a GIF. Below this, there are options to import a company letterhead into your quote. To do this, you need to select the imported Word letterhead option, and you need to click the Import Letterhead button. When you click on this button, you can then browse to find your Word document that contains the text or graphic that you want as a letterhead on the opening page of your quote, so it is included on the opening letter. The document you point at must be a Microsoft Word document, and it has to be saved in the old Word 97 to 2003 format. Unfortunately, the letterhead can't be imported from a docx document. So if you've got it saved as a docx document, you can go back in and save it in the older Word 97 to 2003 format. The text or graphic that you want as your letterhead needs to be placed in the Word document itself, in the main part of the Word document, not in the header. So you just need to position it at the top of the page. So you might need to go in and change your formatting slightly before the import will work correctly. The two options here are to include your contact details at the top of every page. Can't really think of why you'd want to remove them. And you can also elect to show the page numbering, date, and HPXL footer in the quote. That's basically just a statement that the estimate was created using Estimator Express. Some builders like to have that included because you can tell the client that you've used market-leading estimating software to create your quote. If you don't want it, of course, you can untick that option there. And I'll leave it ticked for now. At the top of the page here, you'll see we've got the global font and font size controls if you want to change them. So that's all of the page setup options. Once you've had a look at them, click OK to go back to the preferences screen. You can alter the default text of the opening paragraph, or the cover letter as it's sometimes known, by clicking on the Edit Text button here. You can make changes to the text and then save it with a new name. You can in fact save several different opening paragraphs to suit different scenarios, so you could have different introductory paragraphs for different types of job. So I'll click Cancel for now. The next section down allows you to edit the text for the closing paragraph. If you click the Edit Text button, you'll see that we've suggested that you might want to include your terms and conditions. However, this closing paragraph can be anything you want. Terms and conditions is just a suggestion. If you already have terms and conditions written in a Word document, you can copy and paste them into this screen here. You would want to use the Control C and Control and V keys to paste into this box here. Let's click cancel for now. Below this is the section for altering the default text and images for each build phase. If you click the edit text button again, you'll see that here for the brickwork shell, we can make tweaks to the description, and we can even change the diagram if we want to. Click cancel again for now. The last button then we're going to have a look at is the non-edited button here. This allows you to customize the descriptions of products in the quote. Once you alter a description, it'll be saved so that you don't need to repeat the process. So you can simply overtype the text, change it to show the descriptions as you want them to appear in the quote. And once you've done that, click OK. Now click OK to return to the Quote Wizard main screen. There are some other advanced options available, but we've already covered the settings that you're likely to want to change. So now we're going to click Print. The VAT screen will appear and you can select the relevant option. So at the moment it's set to charge VAT at 20%, so I'm going to click OK. So then after a few moments you'll find yourself looking at your customer quote. On the first page here you will see the customer's address twice. Remember that when you created your estimate, there was one place to put the client address and a separate address for the site where that's applicable. If they're one and the same, then you can just delete one of the addresses off the cover page. So you'll see this is where your company logo appears. And here is the opening paragraph or the introductory letter, the cover letter for your quote. Of course, you're in Word, so you can edit any of the text in your quote as you would any other Word document. Scroll down and have a look through your quote. So you can change any of the build phase text if you want to. If we scroll right down to the bottom, you'll see there are acceptance forms, one's for you to keep, one's for the client, and then at the very bottom we've got the space for the terms and conditions. So if you're happy with the quote, you can save it. If you don't like it and you want to change the settings, just close it. Then you can go back through the Quote Wizard, change the settings and create the quote once again. Once you've saved it, you can obviously print it or email it directly to your client. So that's your introduction to the Quote Wizard and creating customer quotes, and that concludes Module 4 of the Rapid Takeoff and Estimate Software Skills course.